Welcome to Issues and Answers with your host, Diane Kinderwater. Issues and Answers is presented as a public service to inform, educate, and better the lives of New Mexicans. And now, Issues and Answers with your host, Diane Kinderwater.
Welcome to the program. I'm Diane Kinderwater. I hope you had a memorable and wonderful Christmas season, and of course now the new year 2023. Hopefully you'll have a safe and memorable New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. On this program, as we do every year, we like to look back, review 2022. And weather dominated our whole year, it seems like. Even started from the first day, the first get-go right out of the gate. January 1st, 2022, a year ago was the Sandia tram. Remember, 21 people had to be rescued right down onto the mountain. That only led to a lot of hot air to the elections. People call it a lot of hot air. But what about the fire season? A lot of hot air blew that fire season. We had 2 record fires that we're going to be talking about. So please, I could go on and on about the weather. I used to actually be a weather forecaster at KKOB TV. I love talking about the weather because I'm from Minnesota originally, and all we have to do is really talk about the weather. And of course the Minnesota Vikings, and the Minnesota Twins. I could go on and on, but my guest, Bob Clark, he goes on and on every morning. If you listen to 96.3, he's the morning host on KKOB's morning program. He's here with me every year as we like to reminisce, go back and follow and review the year. So please stay with me as Bob Clark. I won't call him any hot air, but he's going to be on here talking about the highlights of this past year. Stay with us. Happy New Year to you, Bob Clark, the morning host at 96.3 FM. Appreciate
Happy New Year to you, Diane.
Being here, to you and all your listeners, and of course our viewers here on KCHF TV. It's always fun to go back. It's kind of a big homework for me to go back. What happened? What happened?
You know, every year we do this, and I keep waiting for us to start the show by saying, you know, there really wasn't a whole lot going on last year, but that's never the case. I mean, not even close. And this year's, right off of the bat, as you mentioned, and then the wildfires, and then the elections, and Albuquerque crime and homelessness. We set another record for murders, the number of murders in Albuquerque for a second straight year.
Okay, that's the show. You summed it up in a nutshell. But let's take it piece by piece, going back. January 1st, 2022, the Sandia Peak aerial tramway. Can you imagine being stuck? 21 people were stuck for 12 hours?
Yeah, but some even longer. Than that. I remember because I was still on my holiday vacation, but getting ready to go back on the air that Monday, and you wake up, and then later in the day you start seeing these stories, and then you hear more and more the details about how that just sudden cold ice storm just rolled through and froze up the cables on the tram. Now they knew the forecast was calling for the potential of some weather issues, so they started clearing out the customers and getting them down early, but the issue happened. The staff is always the last to come down.
9 o'clock at night.
Yeah, so that was all the staff members. Oh,
national news.
I mean, I'm a little claustrophobic. I can't even imagine being in the tram for 15 plus hours. No, I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Reviewing for this, one of the ladies, one of the employees said at 4 o'clock in the morning, even though they had communication with below, she thought she's going to die, freeze to death. That's scary stuff.
Yeah, and they do have some emergency supplies tucked away on the tram car, but
she said light blankets and gummy lifesavers.
Yeah, not much. Because it's not uncommon for the tram to get stuck every once in a while for an hour, maybe, but nothing like this.
And then, Bob, the weather, as we talked, dominated our year, but it cleared that morning, so the rescuers were able to hike up to this place, and then the people rappelled down.
Yeah.
Who could rappel down from a tram to a mountaintop?
If you want to get off the tram, that's what you got to do.
I don't know. Maybe I would have stayed on.
And that also was one of the more, unfortunately, the final prominent display of the heroism and the skill that we saw from the Metro One helicopter from the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Department.
That was national news, and then again national news. The 4 of them died
back in July.
In a crash. Bernalillo County Sheriff's Officer Under Sheriff Larry Corrin, who was, I believe, running for sheriff, and we had him on our program. Our hearts and prayers go out to Larry's family this holiday season and the new year. He did so much for our community for so many years, as well as Lieutenant Fred Beers, Deputy Michael Levinson, and Bernalillo County Fire Department Rescue. Rescue Specialist Matthew King.
Yeah.
Sad holiday season for their family.
They died heroes, and they were on their way back from Las Vegas in July, mid-July, helping with another fire that was up in that area when, and the preliminary report seems to indicate, because there were two people hiking, and they actually saw the helicopter go down, and just based on their descriptions, they didn't tell investigators that they saw any sort of signs of distress from the helicopter, that it just sort of dropped out of the air. So once the final report is issued, I'm sure we'll get, but it is possible, some people have said it is possible that they got caught in a powerful downdraft that was created by the huge wildfires up in that area of northern New Mexico.
I looked at that preliminary report.
Well, we'll see.
And it was just kind of like facts, didn't come to any conclusion.
Yes, it's very straightforward. Just what? No, not that quickly. These reports from the NTSB take well over a year sometimes.
I was surprised to hear that it didn't have it. I mean, we don't know what happened.
No.
We don't know what happened with that at all. In between that was what, in April?
That was in
July.
Yeah.
And of course, the Sandia tram with the weather was in January. In between that, our whole state exploded with two major, biggest wildfires in
New
our
Mexico
state's
history, both happening basically at the same time.
Jeez, that was up in Moore County around Taos.
Yeah, that
Las
was
Vegas,
the Hermit's
Santa
Peak
Fe.
Calf Canyon fire. And of course, the big story related to those, beyond the destruction and just the massive devastation and the loss on a personal level for so many people, generations of families who've lived in that part of New Mexico, losing their homes that were built over 100 years ago by family, growing up in that area, living in the same home their entire lives, all of that. And then to find out that those two fires, which were started separately and merged together, and it was because of just incredibly stupid decisions by the Forestry Department, U.S. Forest Service, when it comes to these controlled burns. Early April, windy. Oh, let's go ahead and start the prescribed burn today.
That's one time I tell folks, come visit New Mexico, not maybe in April.
Yeah, and then of course, southern New Mexico wasn't immune to the devastating wildfires, the McBride fire down in the Ruidoso area. It appears as though that was started by the high winds bringing down a P&M power line and starting some brush there. That wasn't started by a prescribed burn.
But this Calf Canyon Hermit's Peak fire, the largest fire in New Mexico history, I think many fires are 341,000 acres. This was 3 times 900,000 acres burned. And the aftermath, not only this holiday season, all those folks are without their homes into the new year, but also the rains then came after the fires.
That's not uncommon.
Filled up all of our acequias, not all of our, but many of the acequias, which are the lifeblood of bringing water to various crops throughout the state. So it's just the high winds and the burn scars, losing the homes, the acreage, the trees that are gone, but now the acequias filled up with mud and you can't get the water.
You know, there was a point in the springtime when all of these fires were just getting started and it was dry and we weren't, and it's like, can monsoon season get here soon enough?
78 days.
Fortunately, it did. I mean, monsoon season starts on June 15th officially, and it wasn't long after that where we started getting a lot of rain around New Mexico, which we desperately needed. However, for the people who live in these burn scar areas, obviously it brings its own version of devastation with the flooding.
But I remember the 78. I play tennis. I'm outside, and it's just brittle. Everything was hot. 78 days without any precipitation. And even though where I live, I thought my house, I live in the city, could go up in flames because the trees around it, the bushes, even the evergreens were so brittle. It was a concern. Fences, wooden fences, coyote fences could go up. It was amazing to go that many days without any precipitation.
And then by the time it was all said and done, the monsoon season in many parts of New Mexico, including Albuquerque, were top 10 in terms of how bountiful they were. You know, hopefully that helped to ease the drought conditions a little bit, but it's going to take a couple of years to get it reversed. Here's hoping for a lot of snow in the northern mountains throughout this entire winter so we can build up that snowpack.
Yeah,
which will be a big help.
So,
and for the ski resorts too.
So the weather, it's been a global warming, I mean, could be affecting more drastic. All of these events are more drastic, especially those fires. 2 people died, I think, in the McBride fire.
Yes, an elderly couple who didn't get out of their home in time.
And again, a lot of our tax dollars are going to this. because, as you mentioned, the fires in Las Vegas area, Taos.
Yep, the federal government
caused by the federal government.
The federal government
has to make good.
Has to make good on the mistakes that they made.
And that's a long process, of course, as well. Crime, as you mentioned, still continues. Shootings, school shootings. West Mesa High School, right across the street from West Mesa. Washington Middle School. This was in, I think, February. Children being shot near our schools, at our schools.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Not mass shootings in the sense that we've seen in other schools, but still, I mean, gun violence on our school grounds or near school grounds certainly is a problem everywhere. It can be, and we're not immune to it. But for a second straight year, the city of Albuquerque sets a new record for murders. And then in 2019 had a new record of 89. 2020. With the pandemic and the lockdown orders and a lot of that stuff, the murders came down a little bit. They dropped, I think, to 78 that year. But then 2021, and now here as we wrap up 2022, I mean, we're going through what is the deadliest, most violent stretch in the modern era of the city of Albuquerque over the last 4 years. It's absolutely incredible.
I'm not exaggerating, and it's kind of sad to say. When I drive down Montgomery near Carlisle, I actually lower my head and look around. I mean, that's a major intersection within a city that and I should be doing it for all the other intersections. Just thinking, there's been shootings around here.
Yep.
And I don't like going out at night.
And I know the numbers for the number of homicides and murders get the headlines, and rightly so, because especially when you're setting new records. But there is so much other violence beyond that, where people are assaulted and stabbed and hit and things like that. There's an awful lot of violence going on in this city right now, and then crime and burglaries and robberies and auto theft. And
have you been witnessed this? I have. I'm in a store expecting somebody's going to get in line behind me with their handful of goods.
And they just walk out the door. I have not seen it personally, but I know people who have.
I've seen it.
And I've seen it plenty of times on the news.
And I've seen, this is bad to say, at one particular big box store, I wanted to buy laundry detergent. $21 laundry detergent. It's under lock and key. What the hell? I can't. Why? And you can't find an employee to unlock it to get it because people are not going back to work. Laundry detergent under lock and key. And I said, what is going on? What's going on? And do you know what's going on?
Yes, the retail theft. I mean, people are,
walking out.
Just walk out with it.
Walking out with $41, $22, $40, $2. I could add it up. They also were saying, because I asked, why can't I get my laundry detergent, that they're unscrewing their caps and filling them to the top because, as we know as consumers, they're really not filled up. But under lock and key.
And I guess the other important question in all of this is, why is laundry detergent $22?
Well, as I think you've discussed on your morning show, and I've discussed with friends, because that's what you do on your show, is you talk, what are people talking about at the water cooler? Well, people don't have water coolers anymore, they're not at work, so what do they talk about with their friends, online probably, is the high cost of items. Are they really, because of the supply chain, really, do they need to be that high, or are businesses just inflating the price because consumers are paying for it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, wholesale prices, and then that always drops down to retail prices, what we're paying. But the other thing, too, is, more and more companies are having to pay more and more in terms of higher wages. And then with the price of gas, which hit a record level of $5 a gallon for the first time ever nationally back in mid-June, and has stayed elevated. I mean, even though it's come down, historically, it was still above where most people are used to seeing it throughout much of their lives. And that makes the cost of doing business a lot more expensive as well. So there are certainly legitimate reasons as to why we're all paying more for everything. And those are just a couple of the examples right there. But I have no doubt that, there are some companies
price gouging. Yep. What do you think? We're going to have more topics to discuss, but was the price of gas one of your hottest issues, or
it was
inflation, crime? What were your hottest issues on your show during the year?
The price of gas. I mean, because because that's the thing about when you talk about the price of gas as it relates to inflation or the price of milk, you cannot fool people as to what's going on, because they see these prices every day. They drive by the gas station. If they don't have to fill up today, they know what it's going to cost them tomorrow. And when they go to the grocery store, they know how much a dozen eggs cost now compared to 3 years ago before the pandemic. They understand what the cost of milk is now. They see these prices every single day, and it impacts all of us in one way or another, even if you're in a position where maybe you can, deal with inflation a little bit more than some people at a lower income or at the poverty level. It all impacts us in many different ways, and with the cost of doing business and the cost of buying everything and how that is impacted. But the price of gas was certainly a huge story this year. And I know it's toward earlier this month it's starting to come down. The average price in New Mexico in early December was below $3 a gallon for the first time in a long time, but there's still so much volatility. In terms
I
of
saw
the price
one for
of gas.
$2.93, but then I saw one in Albuquerque for $4.28.
And
what happened with that?
The other part of the price of gas with the price of oil, with OPEC sticking to its guns on reducing its output by 2 million barrels. That's something we could easily make up for with our domestic oil production. But
if we had oil domestic production anymore, but it seems like since the election we don't.
Yeah, well, it's come down. There's no question about that.
We're going to get into the election in a minute, but let's stay with the crime, but also with the homeless.
Yeah.
I heard on your radio show a lot.
That's another huge story.
But safe outdoor spaces. I know you have a lot of shows, the whole news has a lot of shows, but what's the definition of a safe outdoor space?
That's a good question. What it is basically just a sanctioned city homeless encampment that they are going to work with. They're going to have rules in place. They're going to have security and things like that, or at least they're going to try to.
But an encampment outdoor place?
Yes.
An empty lot or a park?
Yes. Well, not a park. They're saying not city parks, or they say they are not going to be approved to be nearby residential areas or business areas. We'll see how all of that plays out.
Because I never really heard what
there was a lot of
safe outdoor space was. Safe for whom? For the homeless people, or safe for us?
They're not safe. I mean, they've done these in other cities, and they're not safe. But they're going to give it a try here. Although, it's. That was the whole process of so-called safe outdoor spaces. What's frustrating about that is the city council initially approved the concept of safe outdoor spaces, and then one councilor, Brooke Bassan, changed her mind and went back, and now they've been trying to get it repealed. So the other lesson we've learned in terms of municipal government and state government, and federal government too, is it's a lot easier to say no at the very beginning and stop something versus saying yes and then trying to go back and repeal it.
So she said no to actually having it, or
yes.
her. So we don't have safe outdoor.
No, we do, because there haven't been enough votes to repeal it.
Okay, but she was going to repeal.
No, if they would have just voted no, if she would have voted no from the beginning, it would have failed 5-4. And the mayor, his hands would have been tied, because he can't change a no vote on council. If there's a yes vote, he can veto it, but you can't veto a no vote. So it would have been able to be stopped right then and there. So that was another big part of the process.
Yes,
that
it was
made the
confusing
story
back
even
and
more
forth. What is it?
But
Where is it?
The bottom line is the homelessness issue in this community has gotten a lot worse in recent years, and it's impacting a lot of people every single day. And if you set up a couple of safe outdoor spaces, the other aspect of this too is, what are you going to do about the people who are out on the streets homeless, who have no interest in going to one of these spots?
And I call them, what's interesting, people call them homeless, and I call them street people, because they choose to live
there are many
on the
people
street.
who are out on the street right now who choose that lifestyle. And they don't want to go somewhere.
So they're not homeless, they just choose to
where
live
they
on
have
the
to
street.
follow rules.
Yeah.
And that's what the city wants to try to do.
People were excited. They called into your radio show. We know a lot of people are coming from out of state. They're not New Mexicans born and bred, or even our recent transplants who've come here. They're people recently coming here. Why? Weather? Because we're allowing it? What's the reason they're coming, Bob Clark?
Well, there's a long-time street reverend who's worked with the homeless in this community for many, many years. And he wrote an editorial in the Journal earlier this year that basically said more of them are coming here because they know the mayor has set up a system where it's hands off, and they don't have to worry about being bothered. So
that's why they're here.
Yeah.
Another big story. A lot of people calling in on that.
Oh yeah.
A lot of stories, because it kept changing. The murder of Michelle Martin's, and the murder of her daughter, Victoria Martin, was big. How many? 2016? How many years ago was that? 16.
And finally,
the sentencing.
all three of the people who've been convicted, her mother, and then Fabian Gonzalez was the only one of those three that went to trial, and he was convicted and sentenced. He ended up with 36 years because of time served and things like that. But the big mystery that we still don't know is who's the person who actually physically killed
the 10-year-old Victoria Martins. Yeah.
And they have some unknown mystery DNA from a man. That's all they have from the crime scene, and they have not been able to match it with anything. And the other aspect of this is, for now, the case is closed, but they will reopen it if they ever get new evidence as to what, if there are any new leads about who this other person is. And the other aspect of this is the district attorney, who pretty much handled this case not from the beginning, but was Raul Torres, and now he's going to be the attorney general. So he's moving up, and there's going to be a new DA. For the Bernalillo County District Attorney's
But you're
Office.
saying the case
so hopefully
is
they'll
closed.
keep that. Well, in the sense that
The
it's not
three involved were sentenced.
I mean,
this
it's
year.
not closed in terms of they're never going to try again to find out who the mystery man was, the potential killer, if there is one.
And moving on to, of course, now we're into November. Actually, I shouldn't say moving on in November. It started 2 years ago. The re-election for the governor and for the U.S. Congress seats and a number of House seats. So it didn't just start in November. It went back.
It's a year-long process with redistricting and all of that fun stuff.
Back in time. Big issues for the election, of course, crime and
education
and inflation.
The economy, everything.
Everything was big.
All big issues. And of course, the governor did win re-election, so she's got another 4 years coming up. Mark Ronchetti, I thought, ran a pretty good campaign. She ended up winning by a little more than 6 percentage points, which I believe I saw is one of the closest races for governor in New Mexico in several decades. He put up a good fight. It's always tough when you're going up against an incumbent, period. But especially with the fact that New Mexico now is even more blue than it's ever been. And that's a process that's been unfolding over the last decade, especially here in Bernalillo County.
I was a little surprised because
she won statewide by about 43,000 votes, and her margin of victory in Bernalillo County was about 43,000 votes. Mm-hmm. So, Bernalillo County basically almost single-handedly sent her back to Santa Fe for another 4-year term.
Question of why, in terms of there was so much criticism during the lockdown, but I guess the people who thought, lock us down, chose her to remain because she had the governor's authority from the Constitution to have all this power. And kind of surprising to me, the legislature just did not rein in some of that power that
there have been some bipartisan efforts, and I think they're going to be again in the 60-day session that starts in a few weeks up in Santa Fe. But unless they can get it through the House and the Senate, and then of course she would probably veto it, even if it reached her desk.
So elections have consequences, but
sure they do.
Our economy, absolutely. The restaurants that are all closed have not come back. A lot of businesses are hurt, and finding people to actually do the work is nearly impossible. In the state government, the numbers are down, even though despite a 9% raise for state police and 6% for state employees, those numbers are down. And the question is, where are those state employees? You try to go to an office, they're not there. They're at home.
Yeah, the governor's, why she didn't do this before the election, I guess she didn't want to upset the labor unions that handle the state employees, but she's finally said, all right, it's time to get everybody back at the office. Well, ultimately, what that ends up looking like, and if there are exceptions, I guess we'll find out eventually.
But all the millions in the report that came out from the legislative...
they're spending $18 million on unused leased office space because of remote work. It's like, so this seems
of our money. This is our tax dollar.
$18 million a year, and to me, it doesn't really make it very complicated as to how you solve that problem. And that is, A, you either get everyone back to work, or
you don't need them
in the office, or you just end the leases when they're up and move on.
Have your viewers, listeners experienced calling a state, city, or county office and
there are a lot of
answering?
people. Yeah, there are a lot of people out there who are frustrated with the level of service really suffering during this time over the last couple of years. So that's another reason why. Look, there might be some agencies or some jobs within state government where working from home really, because maybe they don't deal directly with taxpayers. and they don't provide sort of a quote-unquote customer service directly to taxpayers in terms of answering phones and helping people deal with certain
But they're
issues.
dealing with their fellow employees
Yes.
that need to deal with
Yeah,
one-on-one,
so,
and they're doing that remotely.
There are a lot of people who do.
Yeah,
So.
right. Another big issue, end of the year story was, of course, and it made national news. New Mexico State basketball player Mike Peak was lured into UNM.
Yeah,
what?
Albuquerque's a violent city. UNM's an open campus right in the middle of this city. So it's not unusual to have some violence either near campus or related to someone on campus, but it's been a long time since there's been a deadly shooting actually on campus. And that was just such, and it ended up being revenge seekers from UNM for a fight that happened down in Las Cruces at the football game. Just so much nonsense. And then ultimately it led to the postponement and eventual cancellation of not just the game in Albuquerque, but the game down in Las Cruces. So this is the second time in 3 years that the Lobos and Aggies have not played in basketball. Now, 2 years ago it was because of the pandemic restrictions that the governor had in place. The Lobos and the Aggies basically had to play out of state, and now this year in basketball they didn't play because of the altercation and the deadly shooting. Before 2 years ago, State and New Mexico played in basketball twice a year, every year since World War II.
Your favorite time of the year to watch them, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you're an alum from New Mexico State, which we'll know. Bob, thank you. The time is gone.
Wow.
Now next year, we're going to think of some positive stories. You think there might be? Let's have a list of.
I think that whether we're talking positive or negative 1 year from now, once again, that's going to be up to the state of New Mexico and what happens, right?
Right. It's not up to us.
There's positive news out there.
There's positive as well.
There is positive news. There is.
Can you name some? I won't put you on the spot. Can we name something now? Thank you again for taking your time to be here. It's always
my pleasure.
Entertaining show with you.
I enjoy being with you.
And you're entertaining on the radio, 96.3 as well. That's where I get my news and my laughs, so thanks for that.
You bet.
And I appreciate your callers and their insight of what is happening in their lives and what they're able to share, because I thought, I didn't think of that.
Yeah.
But I do. Thank you for watching the show. Make it a great 2023. Happy New Year to you and your family. Be safe, and let's look and all work towards positive stories for 2023. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Issues and Answers with your host Diane Kinnewater is presented as a public service to inform, educate, and better the lives of New Mexicans. To comment on today's program or to purchase a copy of any Issues and Answers program, visit sunbroadcasting.org or call us at 505-345-1991.